up, really gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Yeah. Set your affirmations, aspirations. I got shit to do, the aftermath of preparation. Good food, good mood, blood in circulation. One step at a time, yeah, that's how you make it. Set a goal you control and the steps you take them. I try to pick one thought, have some concentration. And if I make a mistake, it's called education. I try to do this every day, call it replication. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Life ain't easy, yo, I think there's a reason, though. Ups and downs, just like every different season, yo. Sometimes I'm high, other times I'm barely breathing, though. I always gotta fight and hide from the demons, yo. Negative thoughts are poison, they rot. Head full of flies, so here come the clouds. They'll never stop unless I can swap all the bad for the good in my head when I'm lost. Yeah, so I'ma fake it till I make it. Positive thoughts are overtaken, I got patience. One day at a time is how you operate a cadence. A flow, you grow, you show yourself a foundation. Stay away from all the shit that causes temptation. I know that I like to do it cause it's sensation. I live my life in my head like a narration. Don't expect greatness, do my best, man, I'll take it. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
All right, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the Authentic Lawyer Summit. We are so excited to have you join us today. I know people are joining in from all across the globe for this event. The last 2 days have been incredible, especially fantastic. Hi, my name is Double Tank. I'm your host for today. I'm also joined today with my friend Aaron. Hey, Aaron, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. I've got that song stuck in my head after the last 2 days, in a good way though. So.
Well, it's a good day, and it is going to be a good day because just the last 2 days have been incredible, haven't they? They've been, we've been joined by a global audience, people from all the way from New Zealand, Australia, all across Asia, Africa, Europe, US and Canada, obviously. Never could have expected these kinds of numbers. Never could have expected such a global audience coming together. What's surprised you most so far, Aaron?
I think it hasn't surprised me. I think it's reaffirmed for me just that what we're trying to do here is resonating with so many people. We've been getting message after message from people that have attended saying they feel reinvigorated, inspired. You know, they've never been to a conference like this. And I think it's proving a couple things. One, you can do this remotely, which we knew. 2, you know, that by talking openly and authentically, that's what we need more of in this profession. And that's been great to see. And really just, yeah, there's alternative ways to do legal conferences, not the boring, you know, panels and the tried and true, but just saying, hey, let's try something different. It's really resonating with people. And that's been awesome to see because this is resonating with us, obviously, as well.
I'd love to know, for people joining in, you can use your comment if whatever platform you're chiming in from allows you to leave comments, but tell us, where are you joining in from today? We'd love to know where you're coming from. We'd love to do a shout out to you. And yeah, I think, you know, kind of what you're talking about, that it's been this collective cathartic moment where people have been telling us that finally the mental health issue that I thought was that I was going through myself is actually true. A lot of other people are going through it. I know in the Women in Law session we had 2 days ago, people felt affirmed that no, it isn't just me imagining it, that like I am kept down, but there's a real systemic issue. And we heard real stories of people who have said no to that. They've sort of given the middle finger to them and said, no, I'm going to stand up for my own self. I'm going to mark my own path. And we also looked at some of the systemic issues, because you shouldn't need to, but yet people have to kind of claw their way out. And that's really unfortunate. And yesterday we had 2 incredible sessions. We talked about parenting and how difficult it is to live up to the demands of this profession, and at the same time be there for your family, be there for your kids, for your spouse, your partner, whatever that is. So I think that was also reaffirming. And finally, yesterday we had that the entire session on how to set yourself apart with business development. And I think, to your point, Aaron, we don't need to do this live. We don't need to go on these big golf games. We don't need to follow a playbook given by someone who has retired from the profession more than 20 years ago, and his only advice is go on a golf game, go on these long lunches. There's a better way. There's a different way of doing things. And chances are the people you're sitting in front of, they want to see the authentic you. And I think that's been the summation of this event. We need to embrace our authenticity. And if we embrace that, we're going to be better professionals. We're going to be happier. We're going to be much more grounded. It's going to make a huge difference. So, I have found this event to be really affirming. And today we're going to continue that, right? Today is all about understanding different perspectives. Aaron, tell us more of what we can expect today.
Yeah, today is all about understanding different perspectives, like you said, Dowell. But this isn't, your classic DEI kind of thing where we look at diversity from one angle. It's about a couple different things, I think. At its core is the fact that we know this profession is not diverse. And I say this as a, white, cis, male, check all those other boxes. I fully acknowledge that. We know at the top of a lot of organizations, we don't have diversity, which is a huge problem. But we also know that, the people there, even though they might check a diversity box, they're just coming at things from such a different angle, based on their own lived experiences. They're not understanding what it's like to be a junior associate these days, to be a legal assistant, to be a person of color, to you name it. And Dowell, you're an outsider, I would say, maybe not anymore, but to this profession, you had no exposure to the legal profession prior to a couple of years ago. And that's an amazing, diverse perspective in its own right, because of some of the things you've brought in, to our firm and the stuff we do together, because you bring a very different perspective based on your experience to the table. And we have too many people, I think, that have grown up in the legal space and just don't realize what the outside world looks like, what it could be. And so I'm so excited for today. We've got an amazing lineup of speakers. We'll get to Chris in a second, who's going to kick things off. But before we do that, let's just do a quick little, I guess we'll call it an energizer, get the juices flowing in our brains. Dowell, we'll see how today goes. These are not any easier than the
this
prior
is the worst
days.
part of the day for me because okay, let's look at it.
Right, so first things first, head over to mentee.com. You can do that on your phone. You can do that on your computer, and just type in the code 14957819. And once you've done that, let us know how you're actually feeling today. It's all anonymous. You have no idea who's saying what. So mentee.com, enter in that code 14957819, and let us know how's today actually going so far. And I will say we've done the same thing, on Tuesday, Wednesday. So we actually are closer to the weekend now. So, if you're choosing that one, we're not as far off as we were on Tuesday when of course people were also choosing that. So I'll give you another 10, 15 seconds or so just to figure that out. I see results coming in. Let's see how we're doing. Hey, we're pretty good so far.
Hey, that's
awesome.
good.
Glad to see. Maybe that's because so many of you were joining us the last 2 days. I'm going to choose to believe that. But in any event, I hope that, everyone leaves here today in at least a good mood, if not better than they did the prior days, or coming in today rather. Feeling inspired, feeling heard, feeling validated, whatever that feeling is going to be for you. All right. We'll move over here. I'm going to show you a quick little brain teaser. You can submit your answer anonymously again on Mentee if you can figure it out. They are not easy. Here's the first one, and take a look at the full screen. That's my only hint here. Take a look at the full screen. And if you think you know what it is, submit your guess here. This one is not easy. We got to get our lawyer brains off and our child brains, open-minded brains on. Dowell, how are we feeling here?
I feel like you have obliterated me with every single one of these brain teasers.
We did not choose any easy ones here. All right, we'll give everyone another 5 seconds if anyone can figure this one out. We got no takers here so far, no surprise. All right, guess the next 3 letters. I-T-S. Not at all intuitive here, so it's literally spelling it out there. All right, we'll get not easier, but maybe a little bit more intuitive, although I would say not very intuitive at all. All right, here's the next one here. It's a phrase. You got to look at things from different perspectives, different angles. What is going on here? Any takers here? Nobody so far. These are not easy. All right, I'm mindful of time here. I'm going to give this one away. Go up in smoke.
Hey, Vivian had an answer.
Vivian got it. Smoke gun. Also not a bad option here. All right, we'll do one last one quickly. See if we can figure this one out. I'm going to give this one away in 5 seconds or so. Dowell, any guesses here?
Oh man, like I don't know, clocking in, clocking out type of thing. I don't know. This is definitely
in
wrong.
between jobs, apparently, is the answer.
Okay.
There we go. Someone's got it in the comments. Not easy, but in any event, we're looking at things differently. On paper, it just says this blob of stuff, but if we look at it from a different perspective, from a different angle, apparently there's actually a phrase going on here. And so, everyone sees things differently here. But enough of that. Let's get to the good stuff. So I am so excited today to have with us Chris Campbell. He is Senior Counsel Litigation. He is the host of Tales of the Tribunal, which is a podcast. He is I'm going to call him a thought leader, even though he may not describe that himself that way. Someone you should be following, I think, on LinkedIn if you're not already, bringing an amazing perspective to the table. And today he's here to talk to us about his presentation called History Has Its Eye on You, Lawyers, Our Time is Now. Chris, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that, Aaron. And yeah, I don't know that I'd call myself a thought leader, but I'm glad to be here with you today. I'd say good morning and greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone here in attendance. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful occasion. I also extend my thanks to Aaron and his team for putting on this fantastic Authentic Lawyers Summit. And if you haven't seen it, haven't been a part of the festivities the last few days, definitely go take part and listen to the recordings later on. But we're here to discuss the differing perspectives today. That's what day 3 is all about, that we have from our various vantage points, roles, and experiences throughout the globe. Today, I'm going to offer you 2 perspectives. First, about where we stand as lawyers in this moment in time. And second, how we can be accountable in advancing DE&I and representation in our various capacities. Now, I should say at the beginning here, I'm speaking today in my personal capacity, and not on behalf of Baker Hughes, and my views today may not necessarily represent those of my employer. Now, it is truly a blessing to be here while we all try to return to some semblance of normalcy post-COVID. And I hope that we can continue to find ways to utilize our opportunities like this to band together in this digital forum, to trade ideas, learn, fellowship, and imagine a better tomorrow. But before we talk about tomorrow, I want to talk about the past, the future past, the history that is to be written, but is not yet so. Its all-seeing gaze, as heavy as it is constant, forgiving as it is judgmental, fleeting as it is focused. Indeed, history has its eyes on all of us. It is this stairway that leads from memories of the past all the way to the present, which persists and begs the question, were we there in times gone by when justice called and the moment demanded it? On just what side of history would we be? When the shot heard round the world gave way to a trail of tears, when lives were lost at Stonewall, when sorrow sang in Selma, where would history see you? Now, it has been said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. As American women lose their right to bodily autonomy, the women in Iran pour themselves into the street, and the Ukrainian people defiantly stare down a tyrant. People from across the African continent, from the Democratic Republic of Congo to Ethiopia to South Sudan, flee from armed conflict. And authoritarians seek to seize power as economic headwinds loom. Indeed, history has its eyes on all of us. Unto whom much is given, much will be required. Book of Luke, chapter 12, verse 48. You may better know that one stated another way by the philosopher Benjamin Parker, who said, with great power comes great responsibility. Aside from our cousins in the judiciary who interpret the law and those in the legislature who write the law, and, well, those in the executive who enforce the law, there are few more aptly situated to change the tide in this cold civil war. It is a fool's notion to believe that merely because one is standing up for what is obviously right and correct, that they will prevail in the streets of public opinion, let alone in the halls of justice. So after this too long-winded introduction, I come to you with a call to action. Your nations need you. Your community needs you. Your descendants need you. Dear lawyers, the call is simple, but a bold one. Take what you do best, i.e. lawyering, from the courtroom, the boardroom, etc., and put it into action for just one cause that you deeply care about. Now, what do I mean when I say that? Lawyers tend to be good at some combination of the following skill sets: strategy and planning, record keeping, organizing, persuading, policy making, and rule mastery. These are all critical skill sets in any political movement. However, too often, especially in the United States, there is a tendency to be reactionary, to only build up these vanguards when they are under attack. That is, of course, important to repel oncoming attacks, but it is essential to go on the offensive as well. Filing lawsuits and regulatory actions to thwart illegal and unconstitutional actions by bad actors in government, and being available at a discounted or pro bono basis for those organizations that are on the front line doing the work. These are the things that lawyers, we the lawyers, see that we must be engaged in if we want to see change. Because let me tell you something, these extremist political think tanks, super PACs, NGOs, wealthy benefactors, and old establishments of political power the world over, that is exactly what they do. They are systematic and dogmatic in their approach, infecting the levers of government and eventually broader society with toxic, regressive policies and understandings of the law as a means to enforce their ideologies on others. And if I'm framing this too much in an American context, it is because, for better or for worse, the United States is the hot zone. What happens in the US will inevitably spill out to the rest of the world. Just ask states in other parts of the Americas or in Central or Eastern Europe. The fact of the matter is that the rest of the population, the non-lawyer population, is most susceptible to be victims of this sort of legal warfare. Many may not know their rights. They may not even recognize the threats to liberty and democracy, and they certainly may not know how to fight back. We do. And if many of us cannot take to the streets, then we must do what we can to organize behind the scenes with lawyers and non-lawyers alike, gather resources, and hold the line for democracy. Indeed, many of these moments and movements likely don't have a robust legal team, or they may not even have considered how they could engage in legal combat outside of political strategy. Designing that plan could be a needed catalyst for change. So let me be clear and let me be direct. Here are 3 things that you can do right now, today, to honor the calls of history. 1, identify, reach out to like-minded lawyer friends. 3 to 6 is more than enough, and identify just 1 to 2 issues that you fundamentally really care about and you'd like to do something about. Maybe 1 local and 1 macro issue. Once you've done that, you can look around to see if there are any orgs already addressing these topics. Then you've got a great place to start, and you can focus your actions and operations from there. 2, recruit. Once you've identified an org or an issue that you want to address or support, identify what further support would be helpful and necessary to changing the tide. Then utilize the group's network and find those gap fillers. Rinse and repeat, and you've got rinse and repeat to staff this mini movement and the structure for guiding that energy. The framing is key. 3, give. In case you don't have the bandwidth to start a new organization or something original, obviously, once you've identified causes that you believe in, your time and your financial strength are the 2 greatest assets that you have. Funding legal operations can be exhausting as an endeavor, but if pursued in concert as a group, it can be achieved. Now, what I'm saying is not novel. It is the strategy employed by countless revolutionaries and decent people throughout history. We are simply talking about how to apply those principles to the legal profession as a united front against those who would make the world a worse place. We can see success of this strategy even from the last century of American history. The women's suffragette movement, the civil rights movement to end segregation, Jim Crow, and to protect voting rights for racial minorities, and LGBTQ plus rights. Unsurprisingly, for all those victories that have been made in those arenas, we have been seeing both the rising tide of political pushback, but more importantly, and more germane to this conversation, the tactical legal challenges that have set the groundwork for many of these gains to be overturned. As a brief refresher, the Voting Rights Act was gutted by the Supreme Court just 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I suppose. And as a result, we saw a wave of generally old Jim Crow states implementing the very measures that act was meant to prevent. Then, for the first time just earlier this year, SCOTUS stripped away an individual freedom in the form of bodily autonomy for American women. The comments of that concurring opinion in that decision make the writing on the wall abundantly clear. Every single non-enumerated right is rife for scrutiny and erosion. None are safe, and we must act now to prevent this vulnerability. Election laws and procedures were changed across the country in response to the accusation that election fraud had occurred where there was not a single shred of evidence of substantive evidence to the same. These are the legal fights as much as they are political ones. And while part of the equation is electing and appointing new members of the judiciary and voting your values, so too do we need lawyers to be ready to defend and to take the fight to those that would strip away liberties from the American people, which is a notion that can be extrapolated across the globe. Identify, recruit, and give. Those are the three pieces of immediate advice I have for you as how we as lawyers can engage in this fight. What is worth noting is also that many of these topics that I've discussed lead to protecting the rights of those who might be disenfranchised and underrepresented. Stated another way, diverse. This is true whether we consider diversity across a spectrum of different topics: ethnicity, culture, gender, ability, orientations, socioeconomic background, and onward. Speaking of diversity, it is important to understand both some key terminology related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as mentoring and sponsorship. But to understand what these terms do not mean is equally important, and how we can each, from our own perspectives, establish frameworks of accountability. I would think, given how much these topics have come to the fore, that we wouldn't need to cover these definitions. But as I start to hear terms like diversity fatigue, or for people in the professional spaces loudly and incorrectly tell me what these terms mean, I think it bears repeating. Let's start with diversity. At its very core, diversity means having a range of people with various racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, and cultural backgrounds and various lifestyles, experiences, and interests to staff your team. That's it. That's all diversity means. It's not about so-called critical race theory or socialist conspiracies. It's about bringing people together to build stronger teams. And why do we care about diversity? For the same reason the Avengers can't be all Iron Man and Captain America. We all have our own strengths and weaknesses, and we all have a role to play. But don't just take my word for it. Diverse teams tend to be 20% more creative, on average generate 10.5 more times more revenue per employee. They see decreased workplace discrimination by 61%, and they record 35% more productive, and then they are 35% more productive than non-diverse teams. Those are just quick numbers and stats for you. Simply put, it's expensive to not be diverse. But diversity isn't the same thing as inclusion. Inclusion means the action of putting those diverse team members into decision-making and engaged roles. They aren't just there to be tokens for window dressing. They actually have to have some tangible, visible responsibility on the team. Then there's equity, which has less to do with the individuals themselves and more to do with the environment that you place them into. How does your organization adjust for the reality that none of the people on your team started from the same place and trying to balance your team's various strengths and weaknesses? That's equity, the environment that you create for your team to succeed. Now, I've intentionally given you straightforward definitions for these terms, not because I don't have more to say, but because I wanted to have a baseline for the rest of the conversation. And frankly, this framing is also a segue into my other points I'd like to make about mentorship and sponsorship. Many of you are likely familiar with the concept of mentoring. Essentially, it is this idea of more senior or experienced people taking time to both teach and learn from more junior members of your team. In the practice of law, this is critical, as many diverse junior lawyers may be unaware or blind to the many unspoken rules of the traditional fields such as law. Now consider that if a first-generation lawyer did not grow up with lawyers in their family or around the business and society of law, then they will find many of their early years wasted on trying to just understand these norms and customs. An advantage that their colleagues whose parents are senior jurists or members of the legal powers that be have as an inherent benefit. Mentoring, by way of spending time with, watching over, and guiding, is one of the fastest ways to bridge that gap. Think about how you'd want to develop any relationships, spending time with, getting to know, and helping shape the future of the subject of that mentee. Mentoring is most effective with sponsorship. Sponsorship is distinct in that it is less about guiding the subject as it is about taking space and creating opportunities for the mentee to grow and to demonstrate their capability. This can even occur outside of the mentee's presence. Nominating a mentee for roles and positions, speaking up for them when the opportunity presents itself. This should not be done blindly, as it is the sponsor exchanging their reputation and notoriety for the sake of making a pathway for the mentee. Again, this is a commonality amongst some successful people, in fact, most people at the top of any given field. Someone giving them an opportunity to make their way. The legal profession is no different in this regard. Finally, regarding these topics, if we want to see any meaningful change in this arena in our lifetimes, we must instill accountability in our staffing, hiring, and leadership. What does this sort of accountability look like? Quantitative metrics and deadlines. As with any attribute, key performance indicator, or numeric evaluation, your values are represented by your measurables. If you actually want a more diverse team, set a standard of how many you want to hire, give yourself a deadline by which you will hire the same, and go find them. It is simply a myth that diverse candidates are any less capable than non-diverse applicants. What is true, however, is that they may not be in obvious positions or may require some digging beneath the surface to find. These systems needn't be built overnight, but one should set a time horizon for meeting that goal. And if the goal is not met, then one must re-examine their processes, talk to the affected individuals, and try again. No leader would accept excuses regarding a critical objective like, oh, well, we just couldn't find any opportunities, or we just couldn't get the job done. If DE&I, and frankly, delivering for your clients actually matters, then we'll find a way to get it done. Some might couch this perspective as a radical or aggressive approach. Some others might. I wouldn't. But I would say that dynamic and bold action is necessary to implement the change that we want to see. At the turn of the century, the Black lawyer population in the United States was just 6%. It jumped up to about 8% for a couple of years. And guess where it rests today? Just under 6%. And despite the Black population at large representing more than double the portion of the greater population, intentional action is key in moving the needle here. Not just for Black people, but for all underrepresented groups. Failing to meet this target is not just a disservice to your clients and your staff, but also creates a fundamental access to justice issue for society at large. One example of this sort of intentional action I'm describing was laid out and outlined by Coca-Cola's ex-general counsel, Bradley Gayton, who proposed requiring Black lawyers handle at least half of the billable time on matters designated to diverse colleagues. This is the way. Notice that none of what I've said would be an affront or deprivation of opportunity to any other person or demographic. It's not affirmative action. There is no suggestion, and in fact, proponents of this ideology denounce the myth that diverse candidates should be leveraged over candidates more suitable for that position. What we are saying, and what we would describe as affirmative action, is that metrics are the same, and we must endeavor to create workplaces that endeavor to reflect the world around us, not ones artificially created by systematic and historic discrimination. If we are serious and not just paying lip service to these values, then we must establish these standards in the same way that Title IX was a catalyst for equality in women's athletics, and implementing contracting metrics for diverse applicants is utilized in government contracts. So too must the legal profession apply such mechanisms if it wants to see meaningful development in this arena. But this direct and metrics-based approach to DE&I represents my perspective. But it is that diversity of thought, pun intended, from gathering together with all of you attending this summit as speakers and attendees that allow us to improve on these goals and to gain positive momentum toward our goals. Perspective is key. And as we close, I'm reminded by the series of affirmations in the poem by the poet Ashuru, positive heart, positive declarations that we, the lawyers, must keep close to our hearts as we search for inspiration across the globe where so many legal challenges present themselves. It goes, I am the stone that the builder refused. I am the visual, the inspiration that made ladies sing the blues. I am the spark that makes your idea bright, the same spark that lights the dark so that you can know your left from your right. I'm your ballad in the box, the bullet in your gun, the inner glow that lets you know to call your brother son. The story that's just begun, the promise of what's to come. And I'm going to remain a soldier till the war is won. I speak to you now, just 2 days after what was supposed to be a wave, and yet appears to be the tide has ebbed when many thought it would flow. Although votes are still being counted, the reality is, regardless of the final tally, that we, the lawyers, have a key role to play in this next chapter of American and global history. We have the ability and the knowledge of these systems to push for justice. We know the levers of power and the way of legal combat. And last I checked, we are as persuasive as we are tenacious. Let these results be a spark of inspiration. Let them be kindling that we could use to set aflame the hearts and minds of those who would heed this call to action, whether it be organization or policy, or by way of carving out space in their teams and organizations for more diverse seats at the table. When I was in school, I used to look back at those grainy black and white photos and videos of people marching, protesting, and fighting for their rights, facing down a tank or attack dogs and fire hoses. My friends and I would wonder for hours what we would have done in those situations. Well, again, for better or for worse, history has looped back to this moment in time. And if you're curious about your own answer to that question of what you would do, look no further, because you're doing it right now. My dear friends, my fellow sisters and brothers in the practice of law, I plead that you hear this urgent call, for time is short and there is much to do. Let us never forget, history has its eyes on you.
That was powerful, powerful stuff, Chris, and I don't have much to add there. Just the messages I'm hearing from you, I mean, just so many. Obviously, this sort of trinity, I'll call it, of identify, recruit, and give, and the idea that we all have this power. I mean, like, Dawal and I, just using this conference as an example, we had an idea. We're like, let's do it. Let's recruit people together. Let's give. We can make things happen. And I think so often we're waiting for someone else to do something. And I think your message is so powerful and so inspiring. We have that power ourselves. We may need some help in numbers, but if there's issues or organizations that you want to support, it's doable. You can drive that change. You don't have to wait for that change to come. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, to be clear. There are going to be systemic issues and challenges and people who don't want that to happen, but it's doable. And the time to do it is definitely now. if not yesterday. The other key thing, which I resonate so much with, was metrics and accountability. And we spoke before the summit. We talked a lot about this. And there's been a complete lack of metrics and accountability, I would say, in this profession in general, but especially when it comes to DE&I and other things like that. Just a complete lack of accountability. There's lots of, we're the best, we're doing a great job, not a whole lot of accountability and acknowledgement of those issues. And I cannot stress enough the messages you said today. So Chris, thank you so much. I'm so excited to listen to the recording of this, to hear this all over again. That was a fantastic way to kick things off today. Thanks again, Chris.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to engaging in the rest of the event.
Amazing. All right, Dowell, what's up next here?
Yeah, we had an activity planned at this point, but I think given what Chris said, and by the way, that was stirring and powerful, I think it makes a lot more sense to follow through on what Chris was talking about. We would love to know, and we can take a couple of minutes right now to go out there and find an organization, go on Google, look something up that really resonates with you, a cause that you stand behind. And as Chris said, and as Peter Parker's uncle has said, with great power comes great responsibility. Us in the legal profession, we have this ability to give back. We have a chance to use our specialized skills to do something meaningful and impactful, especially in a time like this where everything is so turbulent, where they need us to step up to the plate and do something. So if you have a cause that you could use help with, put it in the comments section right now. But if you're trying to find something, also put it in the comments section right now. You just might connect with someone else who is related to that kind of cause. So what do you care about? Is it the environment? Do you care about women's rights? Is it about something to do with what's happening in Iran, or what's happening in the States right now with these elections and kind of the conflict that's creating up? Is it about civil rights? Whatever it is that you care about, now is the time to really put your kind of money where your mouth is, or walk the talk in some ways and find that cause and really connect with it. So if you want, please share it in the comments below. What are you involved with right now? Maybe that'll inspire other people to want to get involved with that organization as well. And if you're looking for an opportunity, something you care about, put it in the comments section as well. Maybe you'll find someone within this community who can connect you with an opportunity with that. So that's what I'll make the activity to be. Take a couple of minutes, do that. We're going to get back in 3 to 5 minutes with our next speaker, but take some time. Think about how you want to contribute, how you want to add to the cause of whether it be internally as well at your firm, DEI related, or maybe external facing, a civil cause, that sort of thing. It's going to make a huge difference. I'm seeing a comment come in. The mission of the Plugs Lawyer brand is to raise the 1.78% of Black female attorneys to 5% by the year 2025. If anyone is interested in helping with her lawyer-themed selfie museum, that's really cool. Okay, so Tiffany, thank you for sharing. We were putting it up there on the screen. Whatever it is that you want to share, please go ahead and share that in the comments, and we'll see you in just a couple of minutes.
everybody. I hope that journey was one where you're able to find some interesting organizations, and definitely keep doing that, of course. Once we're done thereafter, I want to share my screen quickly with a good example, actually, which is a perfect segue into our next speaker. But it's something our next speaker did themselves. This is from 2019, so 3 years ago, a long time in the past here. But an initiative that pressured the Law Society of Ontario, where our next speaker is based, to convert their men's robing room into a much more gender neutral one, and more importantly, to remedy some of the ongoing issues that were going on where men and women were not being treated equally. And what started as a little change.org petition where Brianna thought 25 people would sign led to 900 people, more than 900 people doing it, and compelled and created real actual change and drove that change that Brianna was looking for. So the point is you can take that idea, that thing that's frustrating you, and do something about it. It might work, it might not, but it's a perfect example of the kind of initiative where if you don't try, it's definitely not going to succeed. So I'll throw a link in the chat there. But I'm so excited today to have Brianna Needham with us. She practices commercial litigation with a focus on civil fraud at DLA Piper in Canada, and has extensive experience working on matters involving investigations and injunctions, and all sorts of other complicated stuff that looks nothing like my day job as a corporate lawyer. But most importantly, she's here because she is outspoken, she is passionate, and her version of professionalism looks a lot different, I would say, than the average lawyer, but for good. So Brianna's here to talk about, or the title I should say is You Do You, Combining Lawyering and Living in the Face of Professionalism. So Brianna, over to you and take it away.
Thanks very much, Aaron, and thank you to the hosts for having me here today to speak on a topic that I think is very important and that I know is very near indeed dear to both me and many others. And to kick off, I want to start by acknowledging the privilege that I have to be here speaking on this particular topic today. While I'm a member of the queer community, I'm straight passing. I'm obviously whiter than Casper the Ghost. So why me? And I suspect in part because there really is no one right person to speak on this topic. And I'm not exactly quiet about it when it comes to my views. And I want to be clear heading into this talk, I'm not perfect either. And I'm not here to pretend that I am. No one's perfect. So while some of what I touch on today and say may not be right for everyone, the idea is it doesn't have to be exactly right for you. It's hopefully just providing something to reflect on, something to consider. So I'm going to cover, and it's a short amount of time, so I'm going to jam in as much as I can, but what's professionalism, who is a lawyer, and how do you be you at work? Before I kick off, the first thing I want everyone watching to do is, in your mind, sit here, give it a second, picture. What does a successful lawyer look like to you? Picture it in your mind. Doesn't matter, picture it. We'll come back to that. So first off, what is professionalism? What does that mean? Well, if you Google it, you'll get some dictionary definitions. And I can tell you the first one I found was the skill, good judgment, and polite behavior that is expected from a person who is trained to do a job well. The other definition I found was the conduct, aims, or qualities that characterize or mark a profession or a professional person. Fair enough. But who sets these standards? What do you think a professional looked like in 1882? How about 1922? 1952? 1982? Trust me, there's a theme here. Often when we say professionalism, what we're doing, and what everyone is doing, is defining it as synonymous with markers of privilege. Generally speaking, that's cisgendered, heterosexual, white male privilege. What is it really? It's gatekeeping. What's gatekeeping? Well, gotta love that dictionary. The Oxford English Dictionary defines gatekeeping as, quote, the activity of trying to control who gets particular resources, power, or opportunity and who does not, end quote. So professionalism, it's not really a standard at all. It's bias masquerading under the guise of a gold standard. And if you really want to think about that, think about some of the things that are or have been considered professional, even in the recent past. Straightened hair, suits, neutral colors, even communication standards. You can't be perceived as too emotional or too aggressive or too sassy or just too much. These stereotypes are pervasive and they are perpetuated both obviously and subtly on an ongoing and daily basis. And I'll give you a very, very small, minor example. At a firm I used to work at, even when dress for your day was becoming a trend at other firms and elsewhere on Bay Street, which is where many of the law firms and big financial institutions are centered in Canada, if you wanted to wear jeans on a casual Friday, it was kind of at your own risk. There was a partner there who was known for telling those who dared to wear jeans on Fridays, "Oh, you're not a lawyer today?" Question mark. It's very small and again, very minor in a world where so many lawyers face microaggressions and open disdain daily. But there's a whole lot more implied in that statement than what the words themselves say in 5 to 6 words. So, who is a lawyer? And I asked everyone at the start of this to think of an example of what a successful lawyer looks like. Who did you picture? More importantly, what did they look like to you? Was it someone like Lord Denning? Maybe it was Harvey Specter from Suits. Depending on your age and stage, could have been Saul Goodman, Perry Mason. A lot of people love Lionel Hutz. Lots of Simpson fans out there. So while we are seeing broader representation, there's a bit of a theme in what I just listed. And it's slowly changing, but it's 2022. So we are seeing both in real life and in fiction, examples like Chief Justice Smallwood of the Northwest Territories, Amal Clooney, Brenda Hale, Supreme Court Justice Jackson, and in fiction, there's Ingrid from the new Netflix show The Partner Track, and the current iteration of Mallory Book and the new Marvel TV show She-Hulk. But none of those people are usually what comes to mind at first when people think of lawyers. And why is that? Because that's not what our population looks like. For example, in Canada, the population is a little bit over half women. Statistics Canada tells us that about a quarter of Canada's population last year was comprised of immigrants. The working age population, so that's people about 15 to 64 last year, and what Statistics Canada calls visibly minorities, represented over a quarter of the population and is projected to be just shy of half the population in less than 20 years. Again, last year, Canada was home to over 1 million people who were members of the LGBTQIA2S+ community, with under 25 being a disproportionately large amount of those people. What our population looks like is changing and growing. What do our lawyers look like? They should look like our population. So let me be very clear. Despite what you may have been told about how a lawyer looks or how a lawyer acts, if you have finished law school, if you are an articling student, if you're called to the bar, if you've met whatever the required standards are in whatever jurisdiction you are watching this from, you are a lawyer, period. You're what a lawyer looks like, and you are what a lawyer acts like. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So that's great, Brianna. But how do I bring my whole self to work in a profession that still, despite those nice statistics you gave us, feels like it won't accept me? And the answer is admittedly a very lawyerly one. It depends. Because part of being authentic is that there is no one right way. And it's going to vary based on your age, stage, personality, and the specific factors that affect you, whether that's age, race, religion, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, neurodivergence, socioeconomic status, so much more. We are not one-dimensional. We are multifaceted. We are the totality of the inputs, the confluence of the circumstances that make us the whole of who we are as a person. So what is being authentic in the workplace has to be what is authentic to you, okay? It can't just be what someone else is doing. So whether that's, and some of these are admittedly stereotypical examples, but there are things that have come up and they're small, but they're just things that could make a difference for some people. So whether it's dyeing your hair, wearing the floral print dress, telling everyone you will not be working during Diwali, putting on the big hoop earrings, wearing your natural hair, bringing your favorite lunch to work, advocating for what you care about in the communities you care about, supporting others who are bringing their whole selves to work. Whatever the case may be, and again, certain of those items are in and of themselves stereotypical, but because they're things people haven't felt okay to do because they're not the professional standard. Regardless of what you do and how you choose to engage, do not ever let anyone tell you that you are too much, that you are not enough, that you're not just quite right. And do not do it to yourself. This job is hard enough. It is often more than a full-time job, and pretending to be something that you're not is just like another job on top of itself. I can tell you from personal experience, I have tried it and it is freaking exhausting. And what really turned the corner for me was the realization that I was wasting my own time by not living my life in a way that is authentic for me and that makes me happy. So to close out, because again, limited time and you only want to listen to me talk for so long, the goal is not to do things perfectly. The goal is not to be perfect. We are striving for progress, not perfection. We want to do things differently, and we want that difference to be accepted. Because most of us want to be part of a more equitable profession, and representation is at least part of that point. We are worth so much more than being put in a box, and we are worth so much more than putting ourselves in a box. So I ask you, think again. If you take away nothing else from all of the talking at you I've just done, think of that image of a successful lawyer. And is it the same now as it was 5 minutes ago? And ask yourself, what can I do to change that initial image for the better, both for yourself and for others in the profession? That's all.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Brianna. And again, I've got nothing to add because I don't think there's anything I can add to that. I just want to say thank you for being so authentic, being yourself, being so inspirational. And more importantly, I think showing that as an associate, you can do these things. You don't have to wait to be a partner or be at a firm for 20 years, which I think is so often the case. And I know at times, I'm sure it was not easy for you to do that. I know you faced your share of naysayers and all that, but I'm so, it's just so incredible to see what you've done and the fact that you're able to do this and being such an inspiration for so many other people. And you'll see the comments after, along those lines. But thank you for being you and being a member of this profession and showing people you can be yourself. And in fact, you probably need to be yourself to be happy. And it's such an important message. So thanks so much again for Brianna for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
Perfect. All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. We've heard some really powerful stuff. It's not going to get any less powerful, but we're going to switch gears a little bit in the sense that some of our speakers coming up, they're not lawyers, and that's a good thing. Maybe I was whispering a bit, maybe subconsciously. I think too often, when we called this the Authentic Lawyer Summit, we probably should have called it, the Authentic Legal Professional Summit. But at the end of the day, it would be foolish on our end to say, hey, here's a group of lawyers who are inspirational and authentic and all of that, and forget about so many other members of this profession whose voices need to be heard, are often not heard, and I think lead to a lack of diversity. Because again, we've got the same people who went to the same law schools, not listening, not treating everyone equitably, and not having those voices at the table. So on that note, I'm going to introduce Karen Tushak, who's our next speaker. She's the founder and CEO of Spider Silk Innovative Solutions, which is a company focused on achieving extraordinary results for its clients by providing innovative ideas. We need more of those in this profession. With a proven track record of success, she spent 30 years in the industry working at some of the biggest global law firms. She's worked in-house, and she really understands the value that paraprofessionals, paralegals, clerks can bring to the table. Karen, I am so excited to hear a perspective that we do not hear enough. The floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. And I love that you included the rest of us and didn't just have the lawyers on, because paraprofessionals are definitely so intuitive and so important to the legal industry, but often get forgot about. So I guess to start off, Brianna was talking all about professionalism, which is so often why they get so left behind. That we even use the word paraprofessional sometimes can irk people because they are professionals. But in a law firm, if you're not a lawyer, you're typically not treated as a professional, or you're typically not, you have to use another term like paraprofessional, because several law firms that I've worked in, and they've been great law firms, but a professional designation was left to be the lawyers at the firm. And yet there's this paraprofessional group that adds so much value to the firm, brings so much inclusion to the firm, should be included in all client teams. Their voices need to be heard. And I think the firms that are on the cutting edge and are getting that are so benefiting from that. Paralegals are and law clerks in Ontario are professionals because by definition, a professional is someone who knows more about a subject than the client or the person they are providing services to. Paraprofessionals sit in that unique position where they provide services both to internal lawyers or in-house corporate legal teams. They also provide services directly to the clients of the firm. But they do know more about their specific area. As a paraprofessional, I often had lawyers come to me and ask me about a process that they weren't aware of, how to do a specific precedent. They're just not in that day-to-day grind, so they didn't know all of that stuff. So I was the expert. I would speak to them. I would speak to the clients. I won't tell you my age, but I can only tell you how many articling students and summer students I have trained on their way up through the ranks. And I used to tell them, a paraprofessional will be your best friend at the firm. Because when you treat your paraprofessionals right, and when you give them good work, and when you include them in the firm, they will stay. They are not going to jump. They're not trying to be a partner. They're not going, to the United States or to a startup. They just want to be respected and treated well and valued for the role that they do. So they're really, I laugh. Someone said to me the other day, Karen, you called them the backbone of the firm. But in some ways they are, because they really become that client retention tool. And it's very important for lawyers to recognize that, because clients are speaking directly to the paraprofessionals. They, want to know who the paraprofessionals that are on their team. And it was interesting because when I sat on a forum, a global forum for diversity and inclusion, one of the first questions that came up from somebody was, okay, well, let's not talk right at this exact moment about gender or sexual orientation or race. Let's talk about inclusion at the firm by level, by the role you play, because firms need to really become inclusive in that way, so that, as some of the other speakers said, we have fully diverse teams, diverse by their experience, by their opinions, by the work that they do. Historically, most paralegals and law clerks were women. That time has changed. More men are coming into it. Men are making decisions on what they want to do with their lives. Still highly female, but it is becoming more diverse. Lots of foreign trained lawyers are coming into the profession because they're coming to Canada and they don't want to take their accreditation exams. And they see that there is this career, this professional career that they can come into. And they as well add so much value to the client team, add so much value to the law firm. So it's really important to be inclusive. The other point is that paraprofessionals add so much more to the project, to the firm, than just the revenue generating work that they do. It's really important that you hear your paralegals' voices on the technology you're choosing for the practice group that they work in. They often are the technology champions. In your marketing initiatives, it's important that you include them. In your client dinners, when you've closed a big transaction and they were involved, they are your e-discovery experts. They are your legal entity management experts. They're in innovation, because innovation is not just new technology. It's about process improvement. And that goes to the core of what paraprofessionals are. They are also mentors to almost everybody at the firm, from articling students to marketing people to finance, when they're looking at, how did we charge the paralegals? Can we do it in a fixed fee structure? They are the people that give the information in all of those areas. So they truly are a professional, and that's the way firms need to start looking at them if they really want to have inclusive teams for their legal services delivery model. I could go on and on for hours, I typically do, about paraprofessionals and the value they add. The biggest thing to me, I think, and my message would be, make sure they're at the table for the decisions that you're making for the law firm. Make sure that you're at the table when they're speaking to your clients, when you're choosing technology, when you're having your diversity and inclusion committee meetings. They are integral to the running of the firm, and make sure that you hear their voices.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Karen. And I wish, what you're saying was the reality. And I think right now it's, in many places, it's not. I'm trying to think of like a closing dinner I went to where the paraprofessionals were ever invited, and I can think of zero for sure. And what you say makes so much sense, though.
It's getting better. I can tell you it is getting better. There are some firms. Recently, new technology has been adopted, and many firms have had like a paralegal committee that's looked at it and tested it before the partners approve it. And we often say that we just lead the partners in the right direction as to what to choose. So it is getting better, but I often say when firms are promoting a big deal that they just closed, I used to just say, make sure you're recognizing the paraprofessionals. Now I say, make sure you're recognizing everybody on the team that did that transaction, from the person that photocopied the briefs to the person that delivered them, because that deal would not have closed without the help of everybody on the team.
I love that message. And I'm sure doing that, which is the right thing to do in general, is better for retention. It's better for morale, fulfillment, all that good stuff. And it's so simple. There was a speaker, I think, yesterday who basically said the same thing. I think it was Chad Abood in the morning saying, take that moment to say thank you to that person, to send, to their boss, to whomever, because it goes such a long way. And it's recognition that is so deserved. And I don't think lawyers get enough recognition. And if we're not getting enough, you better believe nobody else working in a legal organization is getting enough recognition either. They're getting even less, which is a shame.
Exactly. I mean, during COVID, we started where, you would send a postcard to someone's house to say thank you. So because it meant so much more because they would get it physically. Who gets mail anymore, right? But it would just be that meaningful to know that you're thinking about them and value them as part of the team.
Amazing. Wish we had all day. Unfortunately, we don't. So Karen, thank you so much for joining us. This was fantastic.
My pleasure.
All right, next up is we're going back to a lawyer here, and then we're going to stick with other incredible members of this profession. So next up is Lesley-Ann Saint-Amour. She's a lawyer, she's an explorer, she is an environmental advocate, and she's an associate at Durant Barristers alongside Aaron Durant and others who are very outspoken in this profession in a fantastic way. Lesley-Ann is also a member of the Sea Women Expeditions team, and she's on the board of directors of both Aboriginal Legal Services and the Algonquin Wildlife Research Station. You're here today. There were so many different topics we could have had you speak on, but today, incorporating Indigenous perspectives for real. And I'm all about the for real narrative. Take it away. I'm so excited to hear what you're going to let us know.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to listen to everyone else speaking as well. And so, as Aaron has said, Lesley-Ann Saint-Amour Indigenous Makwadodam, and I'm a member of the Bonachar Algonquin First Nation. And I'm going to start this by telling you about a bird. I promise, stay with me, it'll make sense. There's a bird in Australia, the brown falcon, that hunts prey that are fleeing forest fires. They'll be seen as the fire is coming through to be attacking prey like mice, lizards, small mammals, and reptiles. And Western scientists would see these birds in the air with sticks that were still on fire. And they thought that these birds living near fires, because that's where they like to hunt, would sometimes pick up sticks for building their nests, shelters, things like that. That would sometimes still be burning, smoldering, and they would end up dropping them. And sometimes that drop would reignite a bit of a fire. It was unfortunate and unintentional result of living next to forest fires that these birds could be moving the fire line. But the Indigenous nations that called this land home knew for many years that there was more going on than the Western scientists thought. These brown falcons were actually known to do what the people called fire foraging, where they were deliberately picking up burning sticks to take them sometimes up to a kilometer away, drop them in an area that has not yet burned in order to flush out their prey. Because the Indigenous people lived in this area with the birds for many generations, and looked at them with humility, recognizing them as capable individuals, they knew that this wasn't just an accident. And recently, in the last couple of years, Western science itself has now confirmed this as well. But for many years, Western science and Indigenous nations were looking at the same action that was being interpreted by two different perspectives and coming to entirely different results. So why am I bringing this up? The legal profession, and in fact, much of the corporate world, I'm sorry to say, are the Western scientists in this story. They're unable to see that those who have been traditionally excluded from much of the profession have so much more to offer that has gone unseen because it wasn't coming from where people expected. As Brianna said so perfectly for me earlier, we didn't always look like what lawyers were thought to look like. It wasn't in the form expected, it wasn't coming from the right people, and so it was dismissed as untrue or not important. My cohort of lawyers, as a young lawyer, I'm only in my second year of practice, we're a little bit different than many of the ones who've come before us. We want to do work that makes a difference, in part because we've come of age in an era of anxiety and fear over whether or not we'll even have a livable planet in the future. We're very aware of how greed, capitalism, and the choices being made around the world are endangering people around the world, including sometimes our own families, loved ones, and communities. Along with this, we've grown up in a world of interconnectedness that generations before us could have never imagined. And this means that we're also immensely aware of these challenges around the world as we're constantly connected. Deloitte has recognized something about Gen Z, about my generation, and it's that we are the ones who value salary the least when it comes to considering a job offer. It's not that we don't consider it, don't get me wrong, but we are the ones who will consider it the least, because what it takes to attract my generation is a commitment to a broader set of societal challenges like sustainability, climate change, equity and diversity, and in many contexts, reconciliation. We want a planet that we can continue to live on and a better life for everyone around us. I'm going to go back to the fire example for a moment. Many of us associate forest fire and fire with destruction, but it doesn't have to be that way. Fire is also a source of rebirth. For example, many trees, including the jack pine, a very quintessential Canadian species, requires fire in order to exist, in order to grow new trees. The seeds are locked away in a thick layer of resin that only melts when a fire burns through the area, and then the seeds are released. Our profession is facing, in many ways, its own fire right now. The legal profession, the corporate world, and the world at large is realizing the ways that we've been doing things aren't working. Lawyers are burning out. We have incredibly high rates of mental illness. We're facing existential anxiety from what else is going on in the world, but we're continuing to do things the same way in many cases. But we need to take this moment of rebirth, this opportunity for change, and try something different. Engaging in meaningful reconciliation is one way we can do things differently to come to a different result. For example, not only in the case of the brown falcon in Australia did Indigenous folks have knowledge that Western science wasn't seeing, but in many areas of the world, the areas with the highest levels of biodiversity are Indigenous governed land. Conservation efforts are statistically more effective when they're done in partnership with Indigenous nations. And those are just a couple of examples that come from my work. But this doesn't mean that it's only firms that do Indigenous law or environmental law that need to think about reconciliation. Indigenous nations and communities, we have aspects of our culture, our knowledge, our laws that apply to every aspect of life because we're nations, because we have our own cultures just like anyone else. And that perspective, that knowledge can fill in gaps that we don't have around the table already and come to better solutions. And so I said, let's do this for real. I'm very tired of simple land acknowledgements. I'm tired of putting on a webinar on International Indigenous Peoples Day and things like that, checking the box and being done. So what are some ways we can do this for real? One is make sure your firm or place of work has an actual plan to tackle a reconciliation. Reconciliation action plans are becoming much more common, looking at where you have influence and power, whether that be money, your reputation, social capital, and how you can use that to advance reconciliation and publish it and be held accountable to it. Support Indigenous students and lawyers, bring them into your firm or act as a mentor to them. And reflect on what Brianna Needham said earlier about ensuring that you can bring yourself to work and making sure you're making a space where Indigenous lawyers and students can actually bring themselves to work. Think about where you spend your money, support Indigenous and other diverse businesses. And lastly, advocate. I cannot tell you how many times in a workplace I've had someone approach me and say, I think someone said something racist. Am I right? And I'm like, yeah, that was racist. What'd you do about it? Oh, nothing. I didn't think it was my place. If you hear something racist, It's always your place to call it out. If you're not sure if it was problematic, sure, Google it and then call them out. Please stop putting the burden on Indigenous folks, Black folks, people of color, in order to call things out, to advocate, and to make change. It's your place to do it, and you can do it too. Keeping in mind all of these things, and keeping in mind the story of the brown falcon and how Western science for years missed what was actually going on, if we actually engage in reconciliation, if we actually bring Indigenous perspectives to the table, I promise you it'll bring you a much better firm, a much more effective firm, and hopefully a little bit of a step closer to a more livable future. Thank you. Miigwech.
And thank you so much for joining us. And I think, one thing I hear from you and all the other speakers is there's a lot of good moral reasons to do this, but these things are not, counter to good business. And I never want to make it about that. But I think so often it's like, well, we would do these things, but it's going to have this negative effect. Like, no, there's going to be all these positive effects in addition to doing it for all the right reasons. Like, does that make sense to you? Or like, why are organizations not doing this stuff?
I think part of it is people are afraid of taking the wrong step and getting called out for it. I think people are afraid of using their social capital up and then not being able to use it when they want to for something more personal. And you're right, people think it will be more of a cost than it is. And I've accepted a long time ago that sometimes you have to make the business case because people don't care about the moral reasons. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll make whatever case I need to get this through to people.
Amazing. And I can see Latanya's our next speaker. She's clapping behind the scenes because I know this resonates with her and so many people listening. We shouldn't have to make business cases for any of these things. It's ridiculous that even comes up. Although having worked with enough legal organizations and firms in the last little while, it's like there's the narrative I say to the junior lawyers, and then there's the narrative we say to the firms, because the problem is there's a disconnect between what should be done and what they care about in a lot of cases, not always.
Absolutely.
And I hope that through the effort of yourself and so many others, that goes away. But we've all got a role to play, myself definitely included, and we've got to recognize that privilege and take these steps to do the right thing. And also to know, I think, that doing the right thing actually is going to lead to all the other things we want. They're not mutually exclusive.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your perspective. This was fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. All right. Well, next up, another one of amazing speakers in this line of fantastic people. It is, and I'm going to add you to the stream, Latanya Farquharson. She's an experienced legal executive assistant, so not a lawyer, which is fantastic. Currently working at Wealthsimple, a huge Canadian tech company, partnering with the chief legal officer in their legal and regulatory operations department and the chief people officer with the company's human resources team. She worked in tons of legal capacities with seasoned lawyers and legal professionals, companies like BDO, BLG, and Altus Group. She's a trusted legal professional and strategic partner and hopes to shed some light on how underutilizing support staff is hurtful to any business. And before I turn the floor over to you, I just want to say, when you were reaching out about this event, you had so many different topics you wanted to talk about. I was like, oh, I actually want you to talk about all of them. If we're going to choose one, which is the one that you want to talk about today? And it was this one, and I think you titled it Not Just an Assistant. So the floor is yours. I can't wait to hear this perspective because it is so, so needed.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And thank you for the invitation to speak today. When I saw the LinkedIn post about this summit, making a call out for individuals in the legal profession outside of lawyers, I was so excited. Also really happy that I can echo Karen's most recent talk on paraprofessionals. So having the opportunity to speak in front of lawyers and legal professionals like yourselves who are open-minded and really willing to challenge the status quo are my kind of people. So I'm really happy to be here today and to be able to take up some space. So before I start, I wanted to give a little background story about how I got into the legal profession and my decision to become a legal executive assistant. So my mother and father both immigrated to Canada from the tiny but mighty island of Jamaica. Fast forward a few years, my mom in particular had an interest in law. She studied and eventually became what they called back then a legal secretary. So after her studies, she applied and applied and applied, and thankfully landed a legal secretary position at one of Canada's biggest law firms, Stikeman Elliott. Although for her, it was a busy occupation for a married woman with 2 small children, one thing I remember very vividly is that she loved it. The story she told me about the interesting files she worked on, and of course, the swanky holiday parties that were so much fun. I felt like I had to look into getting into the legal field some way, somehow. So when the time came for me to figure out what I wanted to study, I made the definitive decision to choose law. Fast forward again to entering the legal profession. My first ever job out of school was working as a receptionist / legal assistant at an immigration law firm in Midtown Toronto. I can honestly say that this job solidified my decision to be in the legal field indefinitely. But strangely, I still wrestled with whether or not I should go to law school, because isn't that what people do? So as I progressed through my tenure at this company, I quickly realized being a lawyer just wasn't for me. Why? The lawyers I worked with always looked stressed. They seemed to live off of coffee, and they literally invented the term team no sleep. Although my decision to become a lawyer came to an end, I knew I wanted to be a part of the legal process and to be a key contributor. So I started to do some research and ultimately came up with a very open goal to one day become either an executive business partner / EA, chief of staff, or maybe a chief operating officer one day. Sky's the limit for me. So the purpose of giving this backstory is because, contrary to popular belief, the ultimate goal for individuals hoping to break into law isn't always being a lawyer. Some of us strive to be good business partners, good administrative assistants, and good ambassadors. Eventually, we all become sounding boards, comms coaches, proxies, representatives of our execs internally and externally, all while being totally committed to another's career goals and objectives. Some of you are probably saying to yourself, I call BS. Who wants to have a job that is dedicated to helping someone other than themselves succeed? The answer is not many. However, because there aren't many who have the genuine desire to partner and support someone else in achieving their goals and objectives professionally, we are gold. There is a reason why it's very difficult to find a good executive assistant, and hiring can sometimes take months. So you may be wondering, how in the world do I attract that type of individual to partner with me? Well, I got the tea, and I will give you 2 tangible ways that you can incorporate almost immediately to find and keep that superstar that will be your right hand. So number 1, build a safe, open, and transparent environment. Think of it this way. The more we know about you, the better we can help you. Talking with other EA friends of mine, they have said that by far the number one thing that has made them quit a job was the relationship or lack thereof with their business partner. In a one-on-one environment like the one between an assistant and the exec that they support, it helps to know that you are in the loop with things. It's the feeling like we should know before others know. This creates a level of trust, loyalty, and dedication that honestly cannot be quantified. So the CLO at my company, who I work closely with, does a really good job of keeping me in the loop during our one-on-ones, and rarely do I not know something important before it happens or when the wheels are already in motion. So this allows for me to always be on my toes and ready to be reactive if needed. So the second practical but often overlooked thing that can keep great talent is one that many might find a little bit, may feel a little uncomfortable hearing this, but this is the Authentic Lawyer Summit. So I'm coming with all the untouchable content that no one wants to talk about. So I think someone actually did say it before me, but number 2 is say thank you. But I'm going to add on to that with money. Everyone knows the famous scene from Jerry Maguire when Cuba Gooding Jr. and Tom Cruise are yelling back and forth, "Show me the money!" I mean, Cuba was definitely onto something. Folks like us who work our butts off to ensure that those around us are taken care of are sometimes forgotten come review time. I was once told that I was a top performer on my team. I came into the department, procured some really great legal software, tested and mastered an analytics software that I had never been exposed to, created new allies and internal stakeholders for my exec, and trained new incoming lawyers, only to be told that a raise or bonus was not in the budget for me. So, doing my research prior to this talk, I was not shocked to know that this isn't new. And to be honest, it's terribly unfortunate. So, to be clear, this is like, I know that this is more of like an HR issue, but just like we advocate for you on a daily basis, we would love the same reciprocated advocacy with HR. So, thank you for listening to me talk about my personal experience with the wonderful world of law through a different lens. I really hope that something I said resonates with you or makes you want to know more and be more for the support staff you work alongside. If you feel you are underutilizing your legal support staff, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to give you some tips and pointers on how to take better advantage of maybe the untapped skills that your support staff may have. So thank you.
That was amazing, and I love hearing your perspective, the energy and the passion, and it's so needed. I love that you said, the stuff we often don't say, but that we should be. I've got a question for you.
Sure.
What is stopping lawyers or others in this profession from doing the things you said? Because relatively speaking, they're pretty easy to do. Is it they're not thinking about it from your perspective? Like, we know the money isn't really the issue. We've seen lawyers getting splashed with money. Like, what's stopping people? What are the reasons you think in their minds they're just not doing this?
It's okay. So to be very honest, I think that some lawyers are in this mindset that they're so busy that they don't have time to advocate for their support staff. And I feel like if they're important and if they're useful and if they're contributing enough to your practice, you should make the time. I was talking with a friend, and she was saying that the lawyer that she works with consistently makes time for her, whether it's even 5-minute syncs to say, are you meeting your goals? How can I help you? If I can't help you, can you direct me to who can help? And very, very proactive in ensuring that she has a good advocate for her, while she's not in the room as well. Right. So I think that's it personally.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much power like the lawyer or often has in these relationships, right? The ability to make things happen. I mean, the assistants also have a lot of power in their own right, which is one of these fascinating sort of dynamics. But I feel like, firms or organizations often are not investing enough time in the people who are not lawyers, and the lawyers are often underestimating the importance of that relationship. And as you said, just being honest, transparent, and open so that there's no surprises. I mean, that's not very time intensive. It makes perfect intuitive sense. And yet here we are talking about it as if it's, this thing that almost no one is doing, which I think is probably accurate. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective. For the lawyers here, listen to this advice. And for everyone else who's here, I can just tell from the comments, and you'll see after, how much that resonated with them. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing. This was fantastic.
Good. I'm glad. Thank you.
All right, everybody. So Murray's going to join us as our last main speaker here. In the meantime, we'll take a couple minutes break, go to the bathroom, stretch your legs, grab a snack. But what I do want to also throw in the comments for people who need CPD or CLE credit, which I think is lawyers and some paraprofessionals, you can just fill out this Google form. I'll add it both on this platform here and separately on LinkedIn momentarily. And you can just use the code Thursday. Thursday is going to be our code. Toss that in if you need it to get credit. And otherwise, we'll be back in 3 minutes with Murray's talk to wrap things up, at least for this portion, before we head into a really great last part of the summit. right, everybody. So closing things off, at least for the speaker portion, is Murray Gottheil. And if you are not following him on LinkedIn, you should be. Because if there's anyone out there who is speaking authentically and openly, it's definitely Murray. And he's, I guess, in a position to do that because, well, he practiced business law for 40 years at a medium-sized firm in Mississauga, Ontario. He's now happily retired, living in the country, and driving a pickup truck. And that also means he's free to say pretty much whatever he wants. And I am so grateful he is. Murray's title, his talk, The View from the End of the Road. But for Murray, it's definitely not the end of the road. But I think there's a lot of power in understanding his perspective here as someone who's lived through it, seen so many things, and is comfortable speaking out authentically and openly. So Murray, over to you. Take it away.
Hi, thank you very much, Aaron, and hello, everybody. So, the thing about starting off a new career is that we often do it when we're young, and we don't know an awful lot about life or about the business world. And you can hardly fault people when they start their career for thinking that the people came before them, you know, the old guys in the corner offices, for thinking that they know what they're doing. And if you think those old folks know what they're doing, then it makes sense to follow the path, the beaten path that they've set up for you. But what if they didn't know what they were doing? What if we follow those paths and those paths end at the top of a cliff, and over the cliff we fall, just like, you know, lemmings going over the edge of the cliff, and we fall into mental and physical health issues, broken relationships, divorce, and God knows what. Well, I was a lemming. I followed that path. I followed the very traditional path of articling student, associate, partner, managing partner. I was really impressed with myself then. Back to partner, senior counsel on a contract basis, and ultimately retirement. I did the burnout thing a few times, got myself in a pretty bad state of mind. Came a point at which sometimes if somebody asked to look at an old file because there was a problem, first thing I think about is, when did it happen? Because if it happened during a certain year, I knew there might be a problem in the file because I knew what was going on back in that, at that time. Anyway, at one point, I just all of a sudden didn't want to do it anymore. The stress had got to me. I came to the conclusion I couldn't continue to practice, under stress the way I could when I was younger. I'd been at it almost 40 years. And I woke up one day and boy, it's amazing how, on one day, all you want to do is be a lawyer and live the law and think about it all the time, think about your business all the time. And then boy, like that, one day you wake up and you say, don't want to do it anymore. So I got out. I retired. I surrendered my license to practice law, moved to the country, bought myself a pickup truck. Life is good now. And I have to tell you, when I surrendered my license to practice law, people said to me, Murray, why are you giving it up for a few $100s a year? You can hold on to it. What if you want to practice law again? And I said, that's why I'm surrendering it. So I don't wake up one day thinking I do want to practice law again. I want to make it pretty difficult for myself to ever get back into it. In fact, I'm a little concerned because they tell me you can reapply. I'm hoping I never want to do that. Anyway, eventually I got to thinking, how did I manage to spend 40 years stumbling along the traditional path and dragging others behind me and telling them that was the way to go? Well, I didn't know any better is the reason. I got to thinking also about that old, admittedly somewhat gender-biased expression, early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Well, I thought about that for a while. I wasn't going to bed early because I was working every evening. I was rising early because I had to get an early start. I had a lot of billable hours to put in. I wasn't healthy. I certainly wasn't wise. Maybe I was wealthy, well, at least until my divorce. Then it wasn't even that. I also thought about what Lorne Greene is reputed to have said, that there were 4 stages to his career, which were as follows. Who's Lorne Greene? That was the first one. Stage 2, get me Lorne Greene. Stage 3, get me a young Lorne Greene. And stage 4, who's Lorne Greene? I'm guessing many of you have no idea of who Lorne Greene was, which kind of proves the point. He was a pretty famous actor once upon a time. Anyway, my life at my firm took me through the same 4 stages. First, nobody knew who I was or cared. Then they wanted me and my billings and my clients. Later, they wanted somebody who had my skill set, but who was willing and able to work the way I used to. And now I'm sure that back at my old firm, where I practiced law for 34 years, if you mention my name 2 years after I retired, most of the associates and staff would say, who's Murray Gottheil? All of this by way of introduction to the idea that those of you, or those of us who've been through all of the stages of our professional career, do have a perspective on it that the younger folks don't have. So now that I'm retired, I'm at the end of my professional road, I sometimes think about what I would say to my younger self if I could go back in time. Now, the first thing I know is I wouldn't try to tell young Murray anything at all, because he probably wouldn't listen. People are like that. I was like that, and lots of other people I've met are like that. But I could ask him some questions and hope that he might think about them and make better decisions than I made back in the day. So allow me to get in my time machine. I'm going to go back for a conversation with young Murray, and I'm going to take you with me. So let's start with Murray thinking about going to law school. So, young Murray, why do you want to go to law school anyway? Well, really not all that sure, but my parents say I have to go to university. Physics 301 was getting too hard, so I figured I wasn't cut out for sciences. I don't like the sight of blood, so medicine's out. Accounting sounded boring. Business, wasn't interested in business. For a bright guy like me, that sort of leaves law school. Young Murray, so you think you can go into law, practice law, and not care about business? You'll learn. So, young Murray, you have any idea whatsoever what day-to-day life of a lawyer is all about? Why, no, old man, am I supposed to? Yeah, you're supposed to. You're supposed to do some research. You're supposed to figure out what you're getting into. And young Murray, have you spoken to any lawyers about what they actually do, or are you dumb enough to think it's just like, on television and in movies? Hey, I'm no dummy. Have you seen my GPA? I know in real life, sometimes lawyers lose a case, and I heard there are a few lawyers don't even go to court. I think they're the losers in the profession. So you have no real idea of why you're going to law school, no notion of what it's like to practice law. Well, I do think the world needs improving, and I'm thinking that with a law degree, I may be able to help the poor and the oppressed. Young Murray, do you realize that if you set out to help the poor and the oppressed in a legal career, you're going to be poor and oppressed? Hey, old man, things are more important than money. Yeah, you poor deluded soul. So, Murray, thinking about law school, does not have a clue. But surely by the time he got there, he had figured it out, don't you think? Let's ask him some questions as he's going into law school. Hey, young Murray, do you really think that taking 3 years and devoting them to getting as high marks as possible is going to make you into the ideal candidate for a law firm? Hey, well, man, I need to get good marks to get a good articling job, don't I? Yeah, good marks will help you get an articling job. Perhaps you might want to think beyond that a little bit. And do you understand that self-confidence is crucial in the legal profession? Have you thought about getting some counseling? Seriously, counseling? It's not like I'm a serial killer. Hey, you don't get it, young Murray. This profession is going to chew you up and spit you out if you're not your best psychological self. You might want to think about that a bit. And by the way, has it dawned on you in the future that your fellow law students will be big shots in law firms and in legal departments and in government, and they'll be in a position to help you advance in your career? Maybe you should take your nose out of your books, be sociable, get to know people, make friends. And if you're not comfortable doing that, maybe get some counseling and learn how. Again, with the counseling, old man, seriously. And you haven't met the clowns in my law school, trust me. They're not my ticket to success. They're going nowhere. Oh, young Murray, you'd be amazed at some of the people I met in law school I thought were going nowhere. Now they're in important positions in the industry and they're handing out jobs and client work. Yeah, think about it. And by the way, you're going to take some time when you're in law school to work out what you want to do when you graduate, or are you going to be stupid enough to take the first job that's offered to you and let that define what type of lawyer you're going to be? Hey, well, man, I have debts to pay. I'll take the highest paying job I can. For a few years at least, I'll accumulate a whole pile of cash, and then I'll go off and do what I want to do. Are you done wasting my time? I have to get back to studying and get my average up. Okay. Somehow I remembered myself as being smarter than that, but well. Okay, I see young Murray still doesn't get it. Maybe things will improve by the time he's looking for an articling job. Let's check in with him. So, young Murray, you really going to take that articling job doing business law when you set out wanting to help the poor and the oppressed? Well, I have a lot of debt, and they offered me this job. Easier to take it than look, for what I really want. Well, I guess easy has its advantage. Are you so flattered to be offered a job by this big downtown firm that you're not even going to stop to think about whether you want that lifestyle, the lifestyle that comes with that? Hey, I checked out the lifestyle. I'm no dummy. They've got free drinks on Friday nights. They pay for dinner whenever you work late. They'll pay my licensing fee and my bar admission expenses. Hey, I know that money, I said the money isn't everything, but it sure is something, isn't it, old man? Yeah, so I see you're going over the dark side without nary a thought about where you're going to end up. And this firm you're talking to that wants you so badly, have they sold you on their hire back ratio? I understand that's a great thing, but have they talked to you about the fired after 3 or 4 years ratio? Nope, they didn't mention that. Why would they ever fire me? That only happens to other people. I told you they want me. Yeah, all right, Murray. Has it occurred to you that perhaps a great hire back ratio can only be maintained by making room, by firing people, after a few years? That makes no sense. I'm sure they run their law firm like a business. Why would they spend money training people for years and let them go for no reason? You've got to be mistaken, old man. All right. Now, whatever happened to helping the poor and the oppressed? Well, you know the old saying, if you're not a socialist at age 30, you've got no heart. Sorry, at age 20, you've got no heart. But if you are a socialist at age 30, you've got no brain. Hey, I'm closer to 30 than 20 now. Besides, Big Law told me they do pro bono work, and once a year they send the juniors out to feed the hungry and have their picture taken doing it. So I'll still be contributing. All right, young Murray still doesn't get it. How about while he's articling? Okay, Murray, so now you're articling. If you're offered to be hired back, are you going to take that job because of the money and the alleged prestige without even thinking about whether you like the firm, whether you like the people, whether you like the culture and the lifestyle? Hey, old man, it's a big firm. They're all the same, aren't they? No, young Murray, they're not all the same. They are all different. And before you get mixed up with a group of people, you've got to figure it out. And by the way, if you are offered to be hired back, you have the guts to decline the offer if it's not the right place for you? Oh, sure, old man. I'll just tell them I don't want the $150,000 salary in the perks. I'm guessing now that weed's legal, you must have started smoking it, old man. Okay, if you're not hired back, are you going to allow the jerks who can't see your value to define you? Or are you going to realize you probably dodged a bullet and just go out and do something fantastic with your career? Well, I suppose if I'm being real, if they don't hire me back, I guess I will have failed. I'll slink off. Maybe I'll look for that shrink you keep talking about. All right, maybe Murray's going to figure out when he's an associate. Let's go find out. So, Murray, you're in your early years as an associate. How do you like working 1,000 hours a week? And if you don't like it much, why are you still doing it? Well, that's just the way it is. You have to get the work done. That means evenings and weekends. So I see you've drunk the Kool-Aid. And have you also bought into the idea you just have to put up with this for a number of years, and then you'll make it big as a partner? And if so, how long are you prepared to do that? Well, that's how it works, old man. When I make partner, I can get the associates to work hard, then I can back off and take it easy. You poor misguided fool. You're getting sucked in and you don't even know it. Do you understand that in private practice, if you don't have a client base, you have zero job security? Zero. Zilch. Nothing. Hey, I'm too busy billing to do much client promotion, but it doesn't matter because I'm working hard. I'm billing a lot of money. They love me here. You just don't get it, big man, do you? Do you comprehend the concept of what have you done for me lately? Very popular concept in law firms. And that most law firms won't hesitate to fire you in an economic downturn if the work dries up, unless you have your own client base. Oh, don't worry about it, old man. That ain't going to happen. And how do you figure you're going to develop the client base if you're billing 1,000 hours a week? I'll think about that when I have some free time. So you believe them when they say that there's going to be lulls and you're going to have free time. How adorable. Do you really expect the partners to offer you a partnership if you don't have a client base, or to even acknowledge that the reason you don't have a client base is that you spend all of your time doing exactly what they asked you to do? I haven't thought about that too much. Don't really have time to think about things like that. I'm too busy billing. And do you actually believe your marriage is going to survive the hours that you're working? Hey, we're working hard, both of us. We're supporting each other in our careers. We work hard, we play hard. We love it. We'll be just fine. Yeah, no, you won't. Have you bought into the nonsense that you're not a success unless you become a partner in a law firm and make a ton of money? Hey, why is that nonsense? Hello? It's kind of the point, isn't it? Unless you're some loser with no ambition. And how long do you think your health is going to hold up if you keep working all those evenings and weekends? I'm young. I can do this for quite a few years, I'm guessing. Okay, so Murray doesn't get it still as an associate. What about when he becomes a junior partner? So, Murray, when exactly did you go from wanting to help the poor and the oppressed to wanting to be one of the top earners at your firm? Well, oh man, it just sort of happened. But I can donate some of my big income to charity and get a tax deduction for it, so I'm still a good guy. And how do you like being a glorified employee while the senior partners run the show? Hey, I have a seat at the table now. I'll show them what I can do. And when are you finally going to get serious about developing that client base? Well, I'm too busy right now, but I'm getting to that real soon. Do you even remember why you wanted to be a lawyer in the first place? Not really. Have you learned to say no to difficult clients, or are you going to just keep putting up with whatever shit they're handing out because you want to maximize your billings? Well, hey, man, sure, some clients are difficult, but what do you want me to do about that? Fire them? Yes, I do. I want you to fire all the people who make you miserable so that you free up time to do what you really need to do to build your career instead of wasting it on those people. Life is too short to spend your time with difficult people just for the money. Trust me, that goes for partners too, by the way. Just too short. Okay, and about partners. Do you like and respect your partners? And if not, for what possible reason haven't you voted with your feet yet? Well, I like most of them. Sure, we have the lunatic fringe, but they're not in charge. Hey, young Murray, you forgot to say yet. Young Murray, a quote from Shakespeare. Remember this, it shall follow as the night follows the day, that the lunatic fringe always takes over eventually. Remember that, it's going to happen. Well, maybe, surely, Murray's going to understand this when he finally becomes a senior partner. Let's find out. So, Murray, you're a senior partner now. Is earning more than most of your partners really making you happy? Well, it makes me happier than if I earned less than them. Hey, plus, I finally developed that client base you've been nagging me about. And have you gotten to the point where you can work reasonable hours and enjoy life? And if not, exactly when do you think that's going to happen? Hey, man, you must know this. You can't hold on to a great client base if you're not around and available to them when they call, whenever they call, day or night. That's just how it works. And then Murray became the managing partner. So, Murray, you're the managing partner now. You're earning quite a bit. Happy now? Well, I'm happy with what I'm earning, but still way too stressed. And you still married, or did the pressure finally do that in? Still married. Could be better. How many years since you last went to the gym regularly? Oh, I try, but I keep canceling because a business meeting comes up, or I need to get something done, or I have to get a deal closed. Sometimes when I'm at the gym, my cell phone rings. I've got to, step aside, deal with the client. Are you basking in the respect and love of your partners and colleagues? Some of them like me. Some of them sort of put up with me. Some of them resent me because I earn more money than them. I figure there are a few of them who are scheming to push me aside and get control. And how much longer do you figure you can do this before you're begging them to let you out? If they beg me to take over, they want me. I'm leading them to great things. Yeah, that ego, I remember that. And then Murray quit his managing partner. Check in with him again. So Murray, let me ask you a question. If you're such a brilliant lawyer, how did you not foresee that when you're spending all that time managing for 5 years, that your client base would sort of shrink because you wouldn't have time for them, and then when you stopped, being the managing partner, your income was going to be decreased? Yeah, I guess I should have seen that coming and call myself a strategist. And how do you like now watching the next generation dismantling everything you spent decades creating? They just don't get it. We had great reasons for building the firm the way we did, and now the lunatic fringe is in charge and they want to change everything. Time to get out yet? Oh, hell yes, I want out. So Murray withdrew as a partner, became a senior counsel under contract. Let's ask him some questions. So Murray, how are things now? You're no longer in the partner club. Well, they pretty much ignore me now. I'm much happier at just working on my own clients now. And how in hell did you manage to let others influence your priorities and decide how your career would progress for 40 years instead of just taking charge of it yourself? I don't know. It just sort of happened. Time to retire yet? Oh, hell yes. And then we catch up with retired Murray. So Murray, what are you going to do now that you spent your entire life working so hard that you never developed any hobbies or interests, or, made a whole bunch of real good friendships? Golf, maybe? Maybe I'll learn how to play golf. Do you really think your law firm partners, colleagues, and referral sources were your friends? Or should you perhaps have taken the time to develop some really strong friendships along the way? I actually thought that they were, but now I sort of understand that friendships were situational. Now that I'm gone, they're gone. Do you have any idea how lucky you were to escape the legal profession with your health mostly intact? I actually do. I've seen many who didn't. Well, I suppose at least you were lucky enough to have saved all that money, especially after the financial hit that you took with the divorce. Old man, I actually prefer to call that a domestic reorganization. It sounds so much more corporate, don't you think? Yeah, the domestic organization. How are you going to spend that money, by the way? I know you want to go on that world cruise. Do you have anyone to go on it with you? Yeah, I'd rather not talk about that. So here's the thing, everyone. I made most of these mistakes, but I did wise up eventually. I escaped my legal career better than some. I got out with my health mostly intact. My second marriage is fantastic. But if I could do it all again, I'd certainly do some things differently. And the most important thing is I would start by defining what I want my life to look like, and then I'd figure out how to fit my career around that. Instead of doing what I did do, which I suspect many of you might have done, which is let the career, take over and then try to squeeze your life in around the career. The exact opposite is what I would have done. And most importantly, I would have tried to set my own priorities, both personal and professional, and I would never again have assumed that the people who came before me knew what the hell they were doing, because they didn't. Maybe they knew about practicing law, but they knew very little about living a life. And that's what I have to tell you today.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that talk, Murray. Love the way you handled that conversation. That was fantastic. And I think in so many of the articles, you've written or things you've talked about, including today, I resonate so much with that in terms of things I, am trying to do a better job at for myself, because like you said, it's so easy to just be guided by everything around you, to feel you have to do things a certain way, and to sort of give up that agency. And where you end up with is, on a path that is not your own path. It's not one that necessarily leads to happiness. It may not lead to money. It may not lead to anything else. It's someone else's version of success. And I think, the real key I hear is taking some time to think about, what do I actually want? What makes me happy? And then, like you said, how do I fit my job into that rather than the opposite? And I think, Murray, well, is that possible? Is that doable? Or is what you're saying impossible? Is it only possible at your stage? Or can you do this, as a younger associate, for example?
I do think it's possible. I don't think the profession makes it easy, but I do think it's possible. The reality is I never thought much about it. I started in the profession. They told me this is what it's like. Here's how you're going to work. And I just did it without thinking about it a whole bunch. I see a lot of much younger people giving a lot of thought to it. And frankly, some of them, choosing to go solo or to go in smaller firms or go into boutiques, and setting the rules, setting the rules for themselves that they want to live by. So no, I don't think it's easy, but yes, I think it's doable. I sure hope it is. I hate to see the next generation saying the same thing, 30 years from now.
Yeah, I'm excited by the people of younger generations speaking up, leading with their feet in a lot of cases, and slow and steady. This profession makes you, I think, doubt every time you step off the traditional path. I know when I was leaving the former big firm I was at, I debated that decision for way too long. The what ifs are so easy to do. What if this? What if that? Am I going to be able to do this on my own, or not on my own, but like without the big firm, this and that? And I have zero regrets for the choices I made. But I knew deep down it was a decision I needed to make a while ago. And I think for many people out there, they know, deep down in their hearts, we all know what the right choice is. There's a lot of what could go wrong. So I guess, Murray, you wanted to chime in there.
Yeah, I do think that today's generation has a lot of advantages. First of all, social media is an advantage. The fact that you can go on LinkedIn and hear all these different voices, or go to this seminar and hear all these different voices, just opens a whole new world. Couldn't do it back in my day. If you were trying, you might have found 2 or 3 people to speak to, but there was nowhere you were going to go and hear these different perspectives. And second, technology. The technology lets you work remotely. The technology lets you have the advantage of a big, the equivalent of the big law library, which only the big firms used to have. The technology allows you to put your hands on documents and precedents and stuff. There's so many things, advantages that you could only have had working at a big firm, which you can now duplicate, assemble teams to take on a bigger project. So I think today's generation, if they use all the tools that are available to them, just have advantages that just were not there back in the day.
100%. And again, doesn't mean it's easy. And certainly I think for all of us starting out, you didn't build this book of business overnight. I don't think it came naturally to you from what you've said. None of this stuff came naturally to me at all. But, a lot of effort, a lot of, perseverance. And I think for me, and it sounds like for you, figuring out, okay, here's what I want. Here's what's authentic to me. And now you're able to do that. And it's been so inspiring and so informative to see you sharing all that wisdom. Because again, you've inhabited so many different roles. Like you said, you've run a law firm, you've been that junior associate, you've been that partner, and then you chose to step off that treadmill and say, you know what, not for me. And now I'm here to, inspire others. So Murray, thank you so much for joining us. This was fantastic as always. And if you're not already following Murray on LinkedIn, you should absolutely be doing that. Murray, thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Perfect. All right, Dowell, you're up.
Yeah, I'm looking at all these comments coming in. I just want to thank everyone for participating here, for sharing your insights. I really wanted to highlight one of the comments that came in that, I feel like a fool visualizing what I do. I feel so intimidated to think this through. And this is such a common theme, right? Like we are afraid of taking charge, but at some point or another, we just have to. There's no one else waiting for us. I think if there's anything that has come out of these last few days, it's this idea that there's no one who's going to choose you. You have to choose yourself. You have to choose your own authentic story, your own vision of what you want to create in the future. And I think, as Murray said, now is a better time than it's ever been. It's okay to dream for yourself. We're hearing all these stories. Tiffany Simmons talking about the fact that she had to start her own firm because her values were quite different than what the large firms that she was at were kind of feeding. So now is a better time than ever to go out and strike it on your own or do things your own way. There are obviously a lot of systemic issues at play here as well. And I think we all need to voice up. We need to talk a lot more. We need to make those LinkedIn posts at every internal meeting. There's any of those microaggressions, as people were saying, that discourages us to live our own authentic stories, our own values, our own kind of purpose and meaning. We have to say stop to that. We have to say no to that. And we have to correct the narrative and make it what it's supposed to be. And actually, on that note, we've been doing this for all the other 4 sessions we've done so far. And in the 5th session as well, I want to do the same thing. One of the reasons that we're putting together this event, Aaron and I, is that we don't want to just talk about stuff. We don't want to just encourage people to make that LinkedIn post and change things at an individual level. We want to change things at the systemic level, at the level of the leadership that runs these law firms, that runs these large organizations, where so much of our authenticity is kind of squished down. And so one of the things we're doing is we want your feedback. We want to know, what is the narrative at your firm, your organization, at law school, whatever it is that you're hearing, and what is the actual ground reality that you, your colleagues, your friends are experiencing? And what's the difference? What do you want the organization that you're at, or that you worked with in the past, to admit candidly? Because if we're going to fix this thing, if we're going to fix the narrative, it has to start by admitting that there's a problem. And what Aaron and I want to do is go back to the leaders of these organizations and put them up to task and say, hey, all this stuff that you're saying publicly about DEI, about people choosing their own path and blah, 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 it's all cheap talk. Why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Why don't you walk the talk and actually follow through on these things? And so to make that happen, we're doing a little survey. It's completely anonymous. And if you go on the authenticlawyersummit.com/perspectives, and I'm putting it in the chat right now, go on there, and there are 3 buttons. Click on the challenge button. It'll take you to a Google form. And this Google form, please fill it out. Fill it out honestly, candidly. I think it's going to make a huge difference. We want to collect this data. We want you to name your organization. You don't need to name yourself. Once again, this is completely anonymous, but we want you to name the organization that you're thinking about as you're filling out this form. And Aaron and I commit to taking all of these insights and going up to the leaders of these organizations and telling them that they need to change how things are done. And if you're a solo practitioner, obviously think of the organizations you've worked at in the past, organizations that you know about, maybe a friend of yours works there. We want to change the systemic structural issues in this profession, and you participating makes a difference. I want to thank everyone for joining us these last few days. It's made a huge difference. I know that when Aaron and I, when we check our LinkedIn, when we check our emails at the end of the day, we are inundated with dozens and dozens of emails every single day telling us that this has been one of the most refreshing things they've done. It's been career affirming. It's been life affirming. It's been this cathartic kind of release. And we would really appreciate it if you would go on LinkedIn and make a post about what you've learned over the last couple of days. Go on LinkedIn, use the hashtag Authentic Lawyer Summit, and tag us, right? Tag me, tag Aaron, and we'll cheer you on. But we're trying to aggregate and collect all of these stories from all of you so that we can go back to more firms. We can amplify the messages of you, the speakers, and this core mission that we care so deeply about. It's about transforming this profession. So please go out there, make that post on LinkedIn. I think it's going to make a huge difference over here. So one last thing before we get into that, there's a Conversations That Matter. Before that, I'll invite Aaron to come on up and share maybe something that you're thinking about as we're coming to the close of our 3 days here.
Yeah, as we get closer to the end, and as Dal mentioned, there's another hour left, so more on that in a second. But I think it's just been so refreshing hearing these messages resonate with people, hearing all our speakers bringing their unique perspectives, whether it was today in the unique bringing the understanding different perspective segments, but also over the last 2-3 days. Everyone is coming at this profession differently. Everyone has their own experiences they bring to the table and the things they've lived through, the good and the bad, at their firms, in real life, all of that. But really at its core, this is all about authenticity and trying to help this profession recognize that authenticity is important. It makes people happier. It's better for their organization from the bottom line, but it's actually better for everybody, for clients, for members of that firm. You name it, it's good for everybody. And I think if we all can take a step back, and I think everyone here knows this, and just really say, what is this whole professionalism thing that we've been trying to do as a profession? Why are we, not walking the talk? Why are we just talking about stuff? And it's because deep down, I think so many of these organizations are afraid of being authentic, of being open, about being transparent. They see this authenticity as what will be their downfall. And what they don't realize is it's actually what's going to set them apart. And on your end, it's what's going to set you apart, because people want to work with people they like and people they know. And if all we are is hidden behind these veneers of, I'm doing great, it's all good, blah, 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 we're not making those real connections. And I think we live in a world where everyone's looking for more connection, more fulfillment, and you get there by being authentic. I know I have, Del, I know you have, and I know we've heard from 30 amazing speakers, all sharing their own, authentic perspectives. And it's been so rewarding to be sitting back here and listening to all these incredible speakers. And Dal, thank you for all the work you did behind the scenes. You put this together. I did the easy part of finding some speakers. You did everything else that anyone is seeing here today, from this Conversations That Matter piece that's coming up, to allowing us to stream it in this way, and to making things so seamless. So Dal, incredible work on your end. And I'm so grateful to be able to work with you in two capacities every single day.
No, the feeling is definitely mutual. I think getting a chance to be an outsider and come into law and get a chance to make a real impact, to make a real difference. I spent a decade working in tech and these other industries, and I see so much transformation, but at the same time, I see a lot of hubris as well. And we're seeing that just over this past week. We're seeing massive layoffs happening in the tech world because they were getting bloated. There was a lot of work happening there, which unfortunately didn't need to be happening. And obviously, there's a lot of stuff that's a very oversimplification. There's obviously incredible people working there who are losing their jobs, and it's quite tragic in that way. But it was getting bloated, and I feel grateful every day that I get to come in and make a difference in a profession that needs it. So I'm really excited about what we've been creating here together. But enough about you and me. Enough about the speakers. I think we've been talking so much about authenticity. It's about the listeners, all of you guys listening in. We want to invite you to the next phase of this conference, the last phase of this conference, which is Conversations That Matter. We want you to have conversations with each other. I remember I'm looking at the comments, and so many people want to connect with, say, Tiffany. Everyone is chiming like, oh, I really care about the purpose. I really care about the thing you're building. Can we talk? Can we speak more? And this next phase is all about that. So if you click again on authenticlawyersummit.com/perspectives, there's a button there called Conversations. If you click on that, I know there's a lot of clicking here, it'll take you to a site called Gather Around. And on Gather Around, we're going to have our conversations with each other, people attending this session itself, where you'll be prompted with guided questions, and it's going to help you find other like-minded people, other people committed to authenticity, other people who are committed to understanding different perspectives, and you'll be able to have a very genuine conversation, not a very superficial conversation that most of these conferences look like. So go on there right now. Go on to authenticlawyersummit.com/perspectives. Click on Conversations That Matter, and it'll take you to Gather Around, and we will see you there. Everyone else who's not joining, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for attending this event over the last couple of days. Please go out there, make a ruckus, stand up for yourself, be authentic, because this lawyer, the world, this profession, we all need you to be authentic. And that's what I'll say to close this off. Thank you so much, guys.